In the grand scheme of the universe, humans were late to the party. By the time Earth's first faster-than-light vessel stumbled into Galactic Alliance territory, 17 sentient species had already been sharing technology, resources, and obscure memes for over 3 centuries. The Alliance welcomed humanity with what they considered open appendages, though to humans it looked more like cautious observation from behind reinforced glass. Standard procedure, they assured Commander Jack Murphy, the unlucky human liaison who'd drawn the short straw for first contact duty. "So you're telling me," Jack said, leaning against the transparent barrier separating him from the Alliance delegation, "that you've been watching our television broadcasts for decades, and the first thing you want to know is if all humans really do dance like Carlton from The Fresh Prince." Dr. Vex Quasar, the Alliance's leading xenobiologist, blinked all 4 of his iridescent eyes in sequence. "Your cultural transmissions have been informative, if confusing. But no, Commander Murphy, we have more pressing scientific inquiries." Jack sighed. "Hit me." Dr. Quasar's translator squawked. "Undin. Violence will not be necessary. It's an expression, Doc. It means go ahead." "Ah, human idioms. Delightful." The scientist didn't sound delighted. He sounded like someone forced to smell expired dairy products. "We need to complete your species' biological profile. Standard procedure. A simple scan, nothing invasive." Jack shrugged. "Scan away." The moment those words left his mouth, a panel in the ceiling opened, and a device that looked like a disco ball mated with a vacuum cleaner descended. It hummed, spun, and bathed Jack in purple light. Dr. Quasar studied the readout on his hovering screen, his 4 eyes widening simultaneously. He tapped the screen, frowned, an expression he'd clearly practiced to communicate with humans, and tapped again. "Is there a problem?" Jack asked. "The hair, right? My ex-wife always said I needed a haircut." The scientist wasn't listening. He was frantically waving over colleagues who clustered around the screen, their appendages gesticulating wildly. Mood purple. Dr. Quasar suddenly shrieked, his voice bypassing the translator entirely. Alarms blared. The observation room erupted into chaos. 3 scientists dove beneath tables. Another pulled out what looked suspiciously like a religious artifact and began praying. Jack blinked. "Is that bad?" "Bad." Dr. Quasar had composed himself, but just barely. His outer membrane was pulsating rapidly. "Commander Murphy, according to our scans, your respiratory process is releasing compounds that are lethal to every known sentient species in the Alliance." "I'm breathing wrong?" "Not wrong. Lethally. Your exhalation contains, well, to put it in terms your Hollywood films might use, you're a walking biological weapon." Jack stared at the scientist, then at the panicking aliens behind him. "You're telling me my breath is that bad? I had coffee this morning, but—" "This is not about odor, Commander. The very chemical composition of your exhalation could kill everyone in this facility within hours if it entered our atmosphere." Dr. Quasar was practically vibrating with anxiety. "How do your species even survive on a planet where everyone is constantly releasing toxins?" "We just do?" Jack shrugged again. "Look, we've been breathing around each other for thousands of years. It hasn't been a problem so far." Fascinating and terrifying. Dr. Quasar made a note on his screen. "The human species has evolved alongside their own poison. Nature finds a way, even if that way is utterly horrifying." Jack Murphy had expected first contact to go poorly for many reasons: cultural misunderstandings, resource conflicts, maybe even good old-fashioned xenophobia. But being quarantined because his breath could commit genocide, that was definitely not in the first contact handbook. "So," Jack said with forced calmness, "I guess this means the welcome party is cancelled." News travels fast in space, especially news about a newly discovered species that exhales death with every breath. Within 24 hours, the Alliance had established a quarantine zone around the entire Sol system that was so extensive it made Earth's old COVID restrictions look like a casual suggestion to maybe stand a few inches apart. "This is ridiculous," Captain Eliza Rodriguez said, pacing the bridge of the Earth vessel Tenacity. They've blockaded our entire system with 50 ships because we breathe. Jack Murphy, who'd finally been allowed to return to his ship after extensive decontamination procedures that left his skin smelling like alien antiseptic and regret, slouched in a chair. Could be worse. At least they're not shooting. Yet Eliza corrected. Her reputation for pessimism was well earned after 15 years in Earth's space program. You give them time. Nothing spooks a governing body like a biological threat they don't understand. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a slender, blue-skinned alien with elongated limbs and what appeared to be perpetually worried eyes. Ambassador Trillex of the Galactic Alliance Security Council looked as though he'd been born anxious and had spent his entire life perfecting the art of concern. "Greetings, Earth vessel," the ambassador said, his translator rendering his voice into something resembling a stressed-out librarian. "I hope you are finding your containment comfortable?" "About as comfortable as a straitjacket at a yoga retreat," Eliza replied, crossing her arms. "Ambassador, this quarantine is completely unwarranted. Humans have coexisted with our own biology for our entire existence." "Yes, fascinating adaptation. Truly remarkable." Trillex nodded nervously. "However, the Alliance cannot risk exposure. The preliminary analysis of your exhalation shows compounds that would cause catastrophic cellular breakdown in all 17 member species." He paused dramatically. "Complete systemic failure within minutes of exposure." Jack leaned forward. "So we've been told," repeatedly. "By everyone. Including the decontamination team that scrubbed me with what felt like cosmic sandpaper." "Necessary precautions," Trillex insisted, his long fingers twitching. "The Council is meeting as we speak to determine next steps. Some factions are advocating for permanent isolation of your species." "Permanent isolation?" Eliza's voice could have frozen nitrogen. "You mean you want to lock us in our system forever, because you're afraid of our breath?" "Not forever." Trillex looked genuinely distressed at the accusation. "Just until we can develop suitable countermeasures. Perhaps a few of your centuries." Jack exchanged glances with Eliza. "A few centuries? Great. So we finally developed faster than light travel, and now we're grounded because we exhale wrong." "Not wrong," Trillex protested. "Just lethally to everyone else." "Isai, is there any possibility of a diplomatic solution?" Eliza asked, clearly struggling to maintain her composure. "Perhaps limited contact under controlled conditions?" The ambassador's skin rippled in what the humans had learned was the equivalent of a thoughtful frown. "The renowned xenobiologist Dr. Vex Quasar has proposed a research initiative. If you would consent to having a research team study your biology, perhaps we could find a way to neutralize the threat." "So we're a threat now," Jack muttered. "A biological one." "Yes," Trillex confirmed, missing the sarcasm entirely, "but potentially a manageable one. With proper protocols." "Fine," Eliza said, her jaw tight. "Send your research team. But they come to our ship, not the other way around. And this blockade better not interfere with our communications with Earth." "Wait. People back home are going to want explanations for why the big galactic welcome party turned into a cosmic restraining order." "Agreed. Dr. Quasar will arrive within your planetary rotation cycle." Trillex's expression softened slightly. "For what it's worth, Captain, many of us are quite excited about humanity joining the galactic community. Once we solve the small issue of you all being biologically equivalent to walking poison gas dispensers." The transmission ended, leaving Eliza and Jack staring at the blank screen. "Well," Jack said after a long silence, "at least we've finally found something humans do better than anyone else in the galaxy." "What, breathing wrong?" "No," Jack grinned, "making a terrible first impression." Dr. Vex Quasar arrived on the Tenacity looking like he'd dressed for a mission to the core of a nuclear reactor. His environmental suit was 3 times thicker than standard Alliance issue, with extra filters, backup filters for the backup filters, and an emergency containment bubble that could deploy in 0.3 seconds. "Is all that really necessary?" Jack asked as he escorted the waddling scientist to the makeshift lab they'd set up. You look like you're about to perform surgery on the sun. Better excessive than extinct, Commander Quasar replied, his voice tinny through the suit's communication system. Your exhalation contains compounds that could reduce my internal organs to what you might call soup in approximately 2 minutes. Appetizing image, thanks. The lab had been prepared according to Dr. Quasar's exacting specifications, which involved sealing off an entire section of the ship and installing so many air filters that the room had a perpetual breeze. A team of 3 other Alliance scientists, similarly encased in protective gear, were already setting up equipment that looked like it belonged in a sci-fi movie's mad scientist scene. Captain Rodriguez was waiting for them, arms crossed and eyebrow raised. Dr. Quasar, welcome aboard the death trap that is apparently a human vessel. Captain Rodriguez. The scientist gave what might have been a bow, though it looked more like he was checking if his boots were still attached. I appreciate your cooperation. I assure you, these studies are vital for future human-alliance relations. Let's get one thing straight, Eliza said, leaning forward slightly. One of the alien scientists flinched backward dramatically. We're cooperating because we want to join the galactic community, not because we accept being treated like a walking biohazard. But you are biohazards, one of the other scientists blurted out before Dr. Quasar could respond. This one had 6 limbs and what appeared to be gills, no offense. Plenty taken, Jack muttered. Dr. Quasar cleared his throat, or whatever passed for a throat inside his environmental suit. Perhaps we should begin the experiments. Captain, Commander, we'll need breath samples from both of you, as well as several other crew members of varying ages, genders, and genetic backgrounds. What followed was 4 hours of what Jack could only describe as the most ridiculous scientific testing he'd ever witnessed. Humans were asked to breathe into various containers, some metallic, some crystalline, some filled with liquids that changed colors alarmingly when exposed to human breath. The worst part came when Ensign Parker sneezed unexpectedly. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. One scientist deployed their emergency bubble, curling up inside it like a terrified pillbug. Another leapt onto a table, screaming something that the translator refused to process. The third simply fainted, their environmental suits' automatic systems preventing them from face-planting onto the deck. Dr. Quasar, to his credit, merely stepped back and made a note on his tablet. Fascinating. Your species expels respiratory particles at high velocity when experiencing nasal irritation. It's called a sneeze, Doc, Jack said, helping Ensign Parker, who was mortified at having caused an interspecies incident. Completely normal. Normal for you, Dr. Quasar corrected. For us, it's equivalent to watching someone spontaneously fire a biological weapon. Eliza pinched the bridge of her nose. Can we please just figure out what exactly in our breath is so deadly to your species? Because frankly, this whole situation is getting old fast. Patience, Captain, Dr. Quasar said, checking a readout from one of the many machines humming in the lab. Science cannot be rushed, especially when he stopped abruptly, staring at the screen. What? What is it? Jack moved closer, causing the scientist to take a reflexive step back. This can't be right, Dr. Quasar muttered, tapping the screen. Computer, reanalyze breath sample 42B, and the machine word. A holographic display appeared, showing molecular structures that meant nothing to Jack but clearly meant something significant to Dr. Quasar. Incredible, the scientist whispered. It can't be that simple. Eliza's patience had clearly reached its limit. What's simple? Use small words, Doctor, preferably now. Dr. Quasar looked up, all 4 eyes blinking in sequence a sign, they'd learned, of profound surprise. Captain, I need to confirm these findings with additional tests. But if my preliminary analysis is correct, he paused dramatically. The lethal compound in human breath might be something you consider completely harmless, something your species produces as a basic metabolic byproduct. You mean like carbon dioxide? Jack suggested, half joking. All 4 of Dr. Quasar's eyes widened simultaneously. Oh, Jack said. I was right, wasn't I? Commander Murphy, Dr. Quasar said slowly, you may have just solved the greatest xenobiological mystery of this encounter without even realizing it. The Galactic Council chamber resembled a massive amphitheater designed by someone with a flair for the dramatic and unlimited access to shiny materials. Representatives from all 17 Alliance species sat in tiered sections, each adapted to their particular physiological needs. Some lounged in aquatic tanks, others perched on gravity-defying platforms, and a few hovered in gaseous suspension fields. At the center of it all was a holographic projection of the tenacity, rotating slowly as if on display at a cosmic museum exhibit. Behold, the vessel of death breathers. Ambassador Trilek stood at the speaking platform, looking even more nervous than usual. Honored counselors, the scientific team led by Dr. Vex Quasar has made significant progress in understanding the human respiratory process. Understanding is not containing. The booming voice came from Counselor Zob, representative of the Vrakan Confederacy, a species known for their paranoia, military prowess, and absolute inability to use indoor voices. The massive, armored alien rose from his reinforced seat. These humans release toxic gas as a natural biological function. They are literally exhaling poison every second of their existence. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. On the holographic display, the tenacity continued its slow rotation, blissfully unaware of being the subject of intense interstellar debate. Counselor Zob, Trilek said, his voice steady despite his obvious discomfort. Dr. Quasar's preliminary findings suggest the compound in question is simple carbon dioxide, a normal byproduct of a byproduct that would kill everyone in this chamber in minutes. Zob interrupted, pounding his armored fist on the railing. Do you propose we ignore this threat because it's natural? Supernovae are natural too. Ambassador, we don't invite them to join the Alliance. Scattered laughter mixed with concerned mumbling. From the aquatic section, Counselor Meel Shah, a bioluminescent cephalopod-like being, raised two of her tentacles. Respected colleagues, perhaps we should consider the scientific implications before making policy decisions. If human biology is incompatible with ours, it speaks to fundamentally different evolutionary paths. This could be an unprecedented opportunity for xenobiological research. Research? Zob scoffed. While we research, these humans could be weaponizing their breath. What if they develop delivery systems? What if they've already built respiratory bombs? Back on the tenacity, Jack Murphy and Eliza Rodriguez watched the council proceedings via transmission, their expressions growing increasingly incredulous. Respiratory bombs? Eliza muttered. Is he serious? Deadly serious, Jack replied. Emphasis on deadly. Dr. Quasar, who had shed his full environmental suit for a more moderate breathing apparatus after his initial findings, sighed. Counselor Zob has a history of alarmist perspectives. His species evolved in a highly competitive ecosystem where paranoia was a survival advantage. Paranoia is putting it mildly, Eliza said. He's talking about us like we're planning to wage biological warfare by breathing heavily at people. On the screen, Zob was now pacing dramatically. The humans must remain quarantined until we can determine if their presence poses an existential threat to the Alliance. I propose a minimum isolation period of 50 cycles, with remote monitoring of their technological development. 50 cycles? Jack turned to Dr. Quasar. How long is that in Earth years? Approximately 73 of your years. The scientist replied apologetically. That's not quarantine. That's imprisonment, Eliza said, her voice dangerously calm. Our entire system locked down for 7 decades because this armored paranoid thinks we might weaponize normal human respiration. In the council chamber, Trilek was attempting to regain control of the discussion. Honored counselors, I must emphasize that there is no evidence suggesting humans have any hostile intent. Their discovery of our existence was accidental, and they have cooperated fully with our safety protocols. Of course they cooperate. Zob bellowed. They want us to lower our guard. My sources indicate that human entertainment media is filled with scenarios of interspecies conflict. They imagine wars with aliens they haven't even met yet. Their cultural mythology is built around conquest. Jack winced. He's been watching our movies, hasn't he? Independence Day was a mistake. Eliza muttered. The debate continued for hours, with the council splitting into three factions: those who viewed humans as a fascinating scientific anomaly to be studied, those who saw them as a potential threat to be contained, and a small group who advocated for limited, controlled integration into the Alliance. By the time the session ended, the only concrete decision was to continue the quarantine while Dr. Quasar completed his research. The vote was 9-7-1, with Councillor Emil Shah abstaining on the grounds that more data was needed. As the transmission ended, Eliza turned to Dr. Quasar. "So that's it? We're still cosmic pariahs because we exhale carbon dioxide." The scientist's four eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture they'd learned indicated deep thought. "Not necessarily, Captain. The Council respects scientific evidence, even Councillor Zob in his own way. If I can prove that human respiration can be safely managed, the vote might shift in your favor." "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" Jack asked. "I have an idea," Dr. Quasar said, "but it will require a human volunteer willing to enter an Alliance facility. With proper protection, of course." "I'll do it," Jack said immediately. The Commander Eliza began. "With all due respect, Captain, I've already been poked, prodded, and scanned by Alliance scientists. You might as well go all the way." Dr. Quasar nodded appreciatively. "Excellent. Commander Murphy, prepare to become the first human to enter an Alliance world." He paused. "As long as you promise not to breathe on anyone." The Alliance research facility on Proxima Station was the most advanced xenobiological laboratory in 3 sectors. It's designed specifically for the study of potentially hazardous alien life forms. It had containment protocols for acid-blooded predators, telepathic parasites, and even creatures that existed partially in other dimensions. It had never before hosted a human. Jack Murphy stood in the center of a circular chamber, surrounded by observation windows behind which dozens of scientists from various species watched with a mixture of fascination and terror. He was wearing what the Alliance technicians assured him was a minimally restrictive breathing apparatus, though it felt like someone had strapped a small air conditioner to his base. Dr. Quasar stood nearby, now wearing a much lighter environmental suit than before. Progress. "And is this thing really necessary?" Jack asked, his voice muffled by the mask. "I feel like I'm cosplaying as the galaxy's least intimidating supervillain." "Here, the mask doesn't filter your breath, Commander," Dr. Quasar explained. "It captures and redirects it through purification systems. You're still exhaling carbon dioxide, we're just making sure it doesn't reach anyone else." "Fantastic. So I'm basically wearing a specialized fart filter, but for my mouth." Dr. Quasar's translator paused for a moment, then apparently decided not to touch that particular human idiom. "We're ready to begin the demonstration. Are you prepared?" Jack gave a thumbs up. "Let's show them humans aren't walking biohazards." The scientist nodded and activated a communications panel. "Esteemed colleagues, thank you for attending this unprecedented demonstration. Today we will present definitive evidence regarding human respiratory biology and its implications for Alliance interaction." The observation windows were filled with attentive alien faces. Jack recognized Councillor Emil Shah, her tentacles slowly undulating in what might be anticipation. Even Councillor Zob was present, though he stood far back from the window, arms crossed over his armored chest. Dr. Quasar continued, "Our initial alarm at human exhalation was well-founded but incomplete. Yes, carbon dioxide is toxic to all Alliance species. But the crucial question is, why? What evolutionary divergence created this fundamental incompatibility?" He activated a holographic display showing 2 planetary environments side by side. On the left, a typical Alliance homeworld atmosphere. On the right, Earth. The key difference isn't the presence of carbon dioxide, it's the concentration. All Alliance worlds evolved with carbon dioxide levels below 0.01%. Earth's atmosphere contains roughly 0.04%, over 4 times higher. Jack noticed several scientists exchanging glances. But here's the truly fascinating part. Dr. Quasar said, his voice rising with scientific excitement. Humans don't just tolerate carbon dioxide, they require it for their planetary ecosystem. Their plant life consumes it as part of a cycle that produces oxygen. Councillor Mealshire moved closer to the glass, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing rapidly. Moreover, Dr. Quasar continued, the concentration in human breath is approximately 4%, hundreds of times higher than what any Alliance species evolved to tolerate. To us, it's a deadly toxin. To humans, it's a normal metabolic byproduct. Jack watched as understanding began to dawn on the alien faces. Dr. Quasar had explained this to him earlier, but seeing the collective realization spread through a room of the galaxy's brightest minds was something else entirely. In essence, Dr. Quasar concluded, humans evolved in what we would consider a toxic environment. Their biology isn't weaponized, it's simply adapted to conditions that would be lethal to us. Different evolutionary paths, leading to incompatible but equally valid biological systems. There was a moment of silence. Then, Councillor Mealshire's voice came through the speakers. This suggests a simple solution, doesn't it, Doctor? Precisely, Councillor. Dr. Quasar nodded enthusiastically. Standard atmospheric filtration systems, modified to capture carbon dioxide at higher efficiency. Personal breathing apparatus for Alliance members visiting human environments. And perhaps most importantly, he gestured to Jack's mask, containment systems for humans visiting Alliance facilities. From the back of the observation area, Councillor Zob's voice boomed. So your solution is to trust that every human will properly wear breathing apparatus around non-humans. That seems dangerously optimistic, Doctor. Jack stepped forward. Councillor, humans have a long history of adapting to protect others. On our world, we've worn masks to prevent spreading respiratory illnesses. We've created containment protocols for laboratories working with dangerous materials. We understand the concept of biological safety. Zob's eyes narrowed. Pretty words. Human, but your breath remains lethal. So is driving a vehicle at high speed, Jack countered, or operating heavy machinery, or cooking with fire. Humans have developed safety protocols for thousands of potentially dangerous activities. We're quite good at not accidentally killing ourselves or others. Dr. Quasar intervened smoothly. Perhaps a practical demonstration would be more convincing than theoretical debate. He gestured to an adjoining chamber where a small plant-like organism sat in a transparent container. This is a Venusian filter fern, one of the most sensitive carbon dioxide detectors in the galaxy. It changes color in response to even trace amounts. He turned to Jack. Commander, if you would remove your mask momentarily, but exhale away from any ventilation systems. Jack hesitated. You sure about this, Doc? The chamber is sealed and has independent ventilation. It's completely safe. Jack unclipped the mask. The scientists behind the glass collectively took a step back. He took a deep breath and exhaled forcefully away from the vents. Dr. Quasar quickly analyzed the readings on his tablet. As you can see, carbon dioxide levels in this sealed chamber rose temporarily, but remained within safe parameters for the rest of the station. With proper protocols, human respiration poses no systemic threat to Alliance facilities. The Venusian filter fern remained unchanged, its purple fronds gently swaying. Councillor Mealshire's bioluminescent patterns formed what Jack had learned was the equivalent of a satisfied smile. I believe this demonstration has been most illuminating, Dr. Quasar. It seems we have been overreacting to what is simply an unusual biological difference. Even Councillor Zob looked slightly less hostile, slightly. Jack reattached his mask and grinned behind it. So, does this mean Earth is welcome in the galactic community after all? Or are you still worried we might sneeze the Alliance into extinction? Dr. Quasar's 4 eyes blinked in rapid sequence, his species equivalent of laughter. Commander Murphy, I believe the diplomatic path forward just became considerably clearer. Good, Jack said. Because honestly, this mask is really uncomfortable, and I've got a lot more breathing to do. 6 months after the Great Breathing Crisis, as Earth media had dubbed it, the Galactic Alliance officially welcomed humanity as its 18th member species. The ceremony took place on the Alliance headquarters station. a massive structure orbiting a neutral star system. Captain Eliza Rodriguez and Commander Jack Murphy stood in the grand ceremonial hall, watching as delegates from all 17 other species filed in. Each alien visitor to the human section wore what humans had taken to calling reverse gas mask sleek, aesthetically designed breathing apparatus that filtered out the carbon dioxide in human exhalation. "Look at that," Jack murmured to Eliza. "6 months ago they thought we were walking bioweapons. Now they're wearing fashion accessories to hang out with us." "Will we?" Eliza nodded, her diplomatic smile firmly in place. Amazing what a little science and a lot of diplomacy can accomplish. The masks had quickly evolved from purely utilitarian devices to status symbols. Some of the wealthier Alliance members sported ornate designs with precious metals and gemstones. The Vracan delegation, including Councillor Zob, wore militaristic models that looked more like tactical gear than medical devices. Ambassador Trillex approached them, his own mask a subtle blue that matched his skin tone. "Captain Rodriguez, Commander Murphy, a momentous day, isn't it?" "Momentous indeed, Ambassador," Eliza replied, "though I notice some species seem more enthusiastic than others." She nodded subtly toward the Vracan delegation, who stood apart from the others, still regarding the humans with obvious suspicion. "Councillor Zob will adapt. In time," Trillex assured them. "The Vracan are naturally cautious. But even they can't argue with the economic benefits of trade with Earth. Your planet's unique atmospheric composition has already led to research breakthroughs in carbon sequestration technology." Jack grinned. "So our deadly breath is actually valuable now?" "Quite. Several industrial processes benefit from higher carbon dioxide levels than most Alliance worlds can produce naturally." Trillex leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Between us, I believe Councillor Zob's opposition is now purely political posturing. The Vracan Commerce Guild has already submitted applications for trading licenses with Earth. The formal ceremony was mercifully brief. The Alliance High Chancellor, a being that resembled a sentient crystal formation, gave a speech about diversity, adaptation, and the strength found in biological differences. Earth's Secretary General responded with similar diplomatic platitudes. The real test came at the reception afterward, where humans and aliens mingled freely for the first time. Despite the breathing apparatus worn by the non-humans, there was still a noticeable bubble of space around each human guest. "It's like we're still radioactive," Jack observed, nursing a drink that the Alliance bartender had assured him was compatible with human biology. "They'll trade with us, but they're not quite ready to bump elbows." "Give it time," Dr. Quasar said, joining them. His lightweight mask was primarily transparent, allowing them to see his facial expressions. "Remember, until recently the idea of standing near a human was equivalent to voluntarily exposing yourself to poison gas." Eliza raised an eyebrow. "That's hardly our fault. We didn't evolve specifically to kill everyone else." "Of course not," the scientist agreed, "but cultural perceptions take time to change. The good news is that the next generation of environmental suits for human interaction will be 40% lighter and almost unnoticeable." "Wonderful," Jack said dryly. "Soon they'll barely know they're protecting themselves from our deadly exhalations." Across the room, a minor commotion caught their attention. A young human diplomat was engaged in animated conversation with representatives from 3 different species. As they watched, she laughed at something one of them said, and the aliens flinched backward slightly before catching themselves. "Old habits," Dr. Quasar remarked. "Speaking of old habits," Eliza said, nodding toward another corner where Councillor Zob was deep in discussion with what appeared to be Earth business representatives. "Looks like our most vocal opponent is already exploring commercial opportunities." Jack snorted. "Typical. Complain about our toxic biology in public, court our toxic money in private." Later, during trade negotiations, Eliza found herself seated across from Councillor Zob, discussing export quotas for Earth minerals. The Vracan was driving a hard bargain, leveraging his species' reputation for stubborn negotiation. "These terms are completely unacceptable," Zob declared, pounding his armored fist on the table. "Earth cannot expect preferential treatment simply because it's a new member. Eliza, who had endured 3 hours of the counselor's posturing, deliberately sighed a long, heavy exhale that made her frustration abundantly clear. Zob's eyes widened slightly behind his mask, and he leaned back a fraction of an inch before catching himself. Eliza pretended not to notice, but a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Perhaps we should take a short recess, counselor. I find I need to catch my breath." The Vraken cleared his throat. "Yes, perhaps that would be wise." As Zob hurriedly gathered his data tablets, Eliza caught Jack's eye across the room. He gave her a subtle thumbs up. Who would have thought that humanity's greatest diplomatic asset would turn out to be something as simple as breathing? Sure, humans couldn't match the Alliance's technology or military might. They couldn't compete with the ancient cultural achievements of species that had been exploring the stars while humans were still figuring out agriculture. But they could exhale. And sometimes that was enough to keep the galaxy on its toes. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not despite their biological differences, but because of them. The species that breathed death had become valued allies, protected trading partners, and occasionally the cause of diplomatic flinching that could work wonders in a tough negotiation. Humanity, fuck yeah. One breath at a time.